Are we live?
We're live.
Hi, everyone. And welcome to the Work Culture Debates. Thank you so much for tuning into this live, or even if you are not tuning live, if you're watching the replay, welcome. Today, we are debating the topic of the work week, 4 hour work, 4 day work week.
Day
Jesus
work.
Christ. Um, but before we dive into this very trendy, very complex topic, we'll take a minute to go around the virtual room and meet our panelists. David, we'll start with you, then Britni, then Shannel, and I'll end us off.
Oh, I hate when we start with me. Um, my name is David Shar, and if you're looking to implement a 4-hour work week, I can help you.
Or day. Oh,
For a day, for a day, I might be able to
He's
help
just
you.
mocking me. It's fine.
I was.
No, out of love. So, David Shar with Illuminate PMC, Performance Management Consultants, where we basically take these real business problems and we pull in the research, but we bring it to you in ways that can actually help. So there's any problem that you're experiencing that is super unique to your organization, you're not alone. Those problems exist and they've been studied. And so we use evidence based practices to come in and help you. Much of what we do includes talent development training, keynote speaking, workshopping, as well as full scale consulting. Next. Who's
Hi,
next?
I'm
Oh,
Britni. Britni Eisenmann with Stokefire. We help you go after giant goals that everyone says are impossible, or if you have a challenge that's been there for years and years, even decades, and you just can't get past it, that's a great fit for us as well. We help you measure whether or not you can weather that next storm and what solution is the exact right solution because of who you are and where you're headed.
I hate going after Brittany. I swear, her elevator pitch, I declare, like she's been working, honing on this thing, right? Hi, everyone. I'm Shannel Winslow. I work with organizational leaders in the federal space, private industry, education sectors, nonprofit, to help them move through organizational change throughout their organization so that folks on the ground don't just, look for change, but they anticipate it. So I help organizations embrace change in a way that does not impact their culture. That's it.
Awesome. So I'm Deborah. I'm the founder and principal consultant of DMC Consulting here in Puerto Rico. I help small and medium businesses to remove barriers to growth that have to do with culture, structure, and human resource management so that they can grow effectively. So that's me. And to start today's topic, I think we need to go to the basics, right? What is a 4 day work week? So who wants to start with that definition?
I can start it. I can see David wants to talk. I'm going to sneak in before David gets
no, I
in.
was going to say you. I saw you leaning in. I knew it was
Okay,
coming.
so it can be a variety of things, but essentially you're working 4 days instead of 5 days throughout the week. That might be that you have Wednesday off, or everyone gets Friday off, or different people get a different day off. But it's essentially your workforce works 4 days instead of 5 days. Now, there's a lot of wiggle room in that. How are we doing flex time? Are these for 10-hour days, or are we keeping them at 8-hour days? Are we changing vacation time, PTO, what that looks like? Are we changing other benefits? Are we changing pay? Are we changing expectations? So there's tons of questions in there that I think we're going to work through in the next hour. But essentially, it just is what it sounds like. David?
I agree. Um, no, so the 4-day work week is mostly that, right? It's mostly those three basic options where it's 4 days and they're 10-hour days, you're getting in all the hours, or where it's 4 days but you're continuing with 8 hours and you're either getting paid for as if you're still working 40 or you're being paid as if you're working 32. But when we started looking into this, one of the things I found really interesting was I thought that this was like this new phenomenon, kind of like when we were talking about quiet quitting, and it's like, wait, this thing is as old as time, and we just had different names for it. But with the 4-day work week, we didn't even have a different name for it. This is exactly what we were calling it in the 1970s, and this
Oh
was the
wow.
newest thing. I pulled this quote from an article straight out of the 1970s, a peer-reviewed article that said the idea of a shortened work week is not an invention of the 1970s. Walter Reuther bargained for a 4-day, 32-hour week in the 1950s. Yet it is only since 1970 that the current rapid increase in interest within both the public and private sectors toward the idea of a shortened work week has emerged. The most common approach has been the introduction of a 4-day work week. The interesting piece is that this was early 70s. By the time we got to 1980, there was not a mention of this stuff until the pandemic. How many years later?
So
No
so
big
why
deal.
do you think that is?
40.
So why it's like what 50, 40, 50 years, like, so why do you think that is? Why aren't more organizations leading or moving towards a 4-day work week or some other type of flex schedule that goes against this whole 5-day 9 to 5 construct that we've fed into and lived for the past however many years?
Status quo, for starters, right? Not questioning, and we talked a little bit about this in our pre-show, but um, it's we're like so much into this just status quo, like you work 8 hours a day for 5 days and that's just you work your 40 hours. And I know there's a lot of wiggle room because a lot of people work more, a lot of people work less. It depends the industry where you're at, because I know the service industry, especially food and hospitality, it's all around, right? But there is this notion that it works, right? That the 5-day work week, the 8 hours a day, it works. It's been proven in a way, and I just think it's hard for people in the day to day to question that, right? So I think there is a sense of it works, so why are we going against it? And I think in the pandemic, employees really spoke up about the need for more flexibility and more wiggle room within that accepted thing and construct. So I think that's why it came up again. Thank you, David, for bringing that from the 70s, because I honestly had no idea. And probably a lot of people think this is a new construct, but I think that's what I would say. Does anybody else have another hypothesis?
Well, I think it's interesting. I'll be honest with you, right? Like that when we go into organizations and they talking about their success and their profit and them being to outlast time, right? One of the um, thoughts that kills all types of growth culture is we've always done it this way, right? And so
Yes.
why do we need to change? We've always done it this way. And so it's very interesting to me when you think about it from something so big and massive and so ingrained into our day to day of this quote unquote 9 to 5, that it's really difficult for organizations across all sectors, across all industries to kind of think of it differently. I mean, we do have outliers, right, that are really trying to lean into it, and they may put it into like an HR kind of, document that is very interesting, that says things like, yeah, you know what? If your manager approves, then you could do this particular flex time. But it's still under the approval to go against the grain or go against what is status quo, versus it being something that allows for organizations to recruit different types of individuals that are in different places in their lives that need different setups that makes them more successful, versus this very objective way and this one size fit all way of doing business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. I think in terms of how this stuff just sort of falls off, and it's always sexy to write about the new thing, like 4-day work week. So in the 70s, they're writing all about it. It's not as sexy to write about it once it's like old. And so you lose track of these companies. And so there's no good literature on why they went back. But what I would assume is that in the 1970s, they were in their version of LinkedIn, which was probably a very smoky room with a lot of bourbon. And, and that was LinkedIn in the 1970s, right? And they're discussing all these new types of ways to get, more profitability and get more out of your workers and whatever. And they decided, hey, have you tried this? And so they all tried it. And it seems to have worked for a lot of organizations. But I don't think it's so unlike what's happening right in this moment with work from home. Work from home, there was study after study about how productive people are at home, etc. But then the next time the organization faces any sort of challenge in terms of productivity or just profitability, etc., they need a solution. And so let's bring people back. Or in this case, in the 1970s, these companies who went in this direction, they're like, it's great. We made more money that way. But now, fast forward a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, it's like profitability is down. You know how we can make more money? Bring people in for 4 days instead for 5 days instead of 4, right? I mean, it just makes sense how this would start unraveling.
And I want to challenge us a bit, right? Because Deborah, you said it, and David, you just said it, right? That the 40-hour work week works, right? I don't necessarily think I agree with that. I don't think that there is.
But I use air quotes.
I saw your air quotes. Okay.
Exactly.
Right. I don't necessarily think it works. Right. I don't think there's enough data to show that it works, right? Across these different types of industries. I mean, there are all types of reasons that go into why an organization is profitable. And yeah, it may be more FaceTime with people, or it may, be more people in the office doing more sales, or, writing more code. I don't know, but I am not quick to get onto the bandwagon that this 40-hour a week works. and
it is confusing.
It is very confusing, right? Because I think about it and I'm like, we may be able to say, yeah, there is a very light, low correlation. Come on, David, you're the professor, right? That kind of low correlation of 40-hour work week, or people being butts in seats 5 days a week, 8 hours a day to profit. But we can also bring in, the fact that we opened up our market to other consumers, or we created a different product, or, the housing market, is controlled by interest rates. And so guess what? I may be more profitable when interest rates go low as a, real estate agent versus when interest rates go up, right? Like, there are so many different factors. So I think that for me, I would challenge us that as we have this discussion, that we don't lean into the fact that this 40-hour a week, y'all get what I'm saying, works, because that data does not support it.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's correlation. I don't think it's causation, right? Like, there's not a lot written on this works because of this, and this. I agree with Shannel, where it's like you have a myriad of factors that are affecting productivity and profitability in a business, right? And having that one employee or 500 employees sitting down at their desk for 8 hours could and could not be directly related, right? So I do think that questioning it is the first step. What I don't think that makes sense, though, it's saying, oh, it's been working for X, Y, and Z, therefore it needs to work for me, when talking about the 4-day work week. So I don't know. It's like, I think that organizations need to consider it as a case-by-case basis, whereas we first assess feasibility, how that implementation would go about, how that would affect our clients, how would that affect communication, recruitment, employee morale. There's so many factors to consider once we're talking about this, but I do agree, like, we need to just start with the assumption that we need to break that mold of thinking that 40 hours a week is the only way to go.
Yeah, it is interesting to look at the fact that one of the most influential studies out there was clearly it was facilitated by, I forget what the organization is called, but it's like the 4-day work week something, right? So I mean, that suggests some potential bias there. But even if the study itself wasn't intentionally biased, there's a couple different factors. One is who is going to select themselves into that study? Who is right now trying out these 4-day work weeks? Probably places that do a lot to engage their employees, and they're really innovative and trying new things, right? Those are probably the types of workplaces that are engaging in these studies right now, right? The other thing is the Hawthorne effect. So the Hawthorne effect, people react differently when they know they're being watched. And this ties into what every buddy who's ever been any sort of manager or leader understands, which is the "what have you done for me lately" effect, right? So people are really, oh, great, you're going to let us work 4 days a week. That's awesome. How long does that last? Because many of these studies only last 6 months. So at the other end of that, this is no longer new. It's no longer fresh. Everything has sort of shifted. There was one study that called out that at the end of 6 months, I've got the statistics here somewhere. They saw this drop in people who said that they wanted more family time. Right, 45% of respondents said they wanted to spend more time with their families. 6 months later, that percentage dropped to 25%, which could either suggest that people are getting a lot of time with their families or that they got enough and they're like, never mind, I want to come back to work, right? But that's within that 6 month time period. It doesn't really predict what happens beyond that. It's not gonna predict what happens beyond that. One of the things that I found most interesting about some of these studies are the splits in the people who report greater burnout, more stress, less stress, because there are splits. They see a significant amount of individuals who report more stress, more burnout when they go to the 4-day work week. What do you all think about that? That we see some where stress and burnout are dropping and others where it's increasing.
I think you need to measure against like job type, personalities, longevity at the place. There's so many slices that you need to take in there to see what else is going on. It's objectively giving people 3-day weekends instead of 2-day weekends will be better for the humans. And even though I don't think any of us agree that the 40-hour work week works, we only have that few of hours because of unions, because people push back on the companies. In capitalism, the organization will always eat the workers all the way down through the end. So when we talk about the 4-day work week, whether we're studying it for 6 months or we have 3 years of data so that we can like get rid of the recency effect, see like 2 actual years compared to each other. If it's the company that is offering this, and if the company believes this is a benefit I'm giving to my employees, you're right, David, that it's going to go away as soon as their profits go down a little bit, or they look like they're going to go down. Stakeholders are going to freak out and they're going to say, we have to return. We're seeing this right now with different organizations in the US. Stakeholders say you have to go back to what you're doing, not anything new. You know, you tried this, good for you. You cared about your employees, but now we need to go back to making money. I think with the 4-day work week, however you implement it and whatever your stance is, there's going to be very few companies that are strong enough to push back against the stakeholders or the owners that just want more money through the like storming and norming phase. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to have a lasting 4-day work week in all of its varieties inside of capitalism, it will have to come from the people side. The people will have to get organized and demand it, just like they did. Instead of 60-hour work weeks, the people came and pushed it down to 40-hour work weeks.
Weren't the United Auto Workers just asking for 4-day work weeks? I think it was part of their negotiation. But I don't think they got it, though.
What was the question? I missed it. I'm sorry.
The UAW, the United Auto Workers, they were asking for a 4-day work week.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of nuggets. I think the first one is going back to the why. Why are we doing a 4-day work week, right? And really doing the pre work and the planning, the research and the communication um, before we decide to execute in any organization. Because I think someone hit the nail on the head earlier. It's not a one size fit all. It's not a broad sweep. We're going to go and do this thing called a 4-day work week and it's going to work, right? Because in certain areas and in certain cases, you just, it doesn't work. It's not, it just does not apply. It's kind of like if you have, you're working at a call center and you have to be there, there's a 24/7, understanding that you're going to be working potentially different types of shifts, right? There's always going to be some exceptions across an organization. And that, is normally offset by differential pay, right? And so being in an organization or some other type of differential benefits that are provided because you are unable to kind of take advantage of, certain things that an organization provides because of the nature of the work that you do, right? So I think that in order to be able to sustain post a 6-month quote unquote trial period, one organization shouldn't say it's a trial period. That's the thing. Setting the expectation in the beginning to be like, you know what, yeah, we may have a pilot program, right? But then when we identify, get information out of that pilot program, we are able to now incorporate that into the larger rollout. This is just the way that we operate. But now, being that it's the way that we operate, this is how we're going to offset certain things we used to do to mitigate, decrease profit or decrease revenue across the board. So this is not just, I would say a human shift, right? You have to look at this also from a financial shift in an organization as well. And that's where organizations fail, right? Because when you have someone at the top that is like, yes, I care about the people and I got to take care of the people and I always got to take care of the people, and they implement things based off of the people, when hardcore money gets involved, right? All of a sudden, they start talking about their golden parachute. And now things are being impacted. And they have shareholders that they didn't take into consideration when we rolling these things out, right? I see it all the time in my work. And that's cool. That's why you hire someone like me. But that was a shameless plug. Second, I would say when we are looking at this around the people aspect, Britni, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said something along the lines of, yes, it will decrease burnout from like the 3-day work week. I mean, I'm sorry, the 3-day weekend that people may have. And we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show. In order for you to actually see an increase in productivity, there is an onus on the employee to actually get to a space where they can actually relax. They are doing things that not just physically recharge themselves, but cognitively recharge themselves. So that when they do come into work, whether they are working for 10 hours or for 8 hours or whatever that makeup looks like, you are truly seeing an increase of deep think and productivity within those employees, right? But I do believe there is an onus as a part of the pre-planning, the planning, and the actual, communication of educating and skilling up the workforce on what does it look like for you to actually go off, do your thing for 3 days, shut down. And that's just not the employee's responsibility. That's also the supervisor's responsibility, the director's responsibility, the VP responsibility. Because if you have people in your chain that are reaching out to employees when they are supposed to be quote unquote off, let me tell you, that is not going to contribute to cognitive or physical recharge. Okay. So there is a huge shift in not just the I'm going to roll this out and from an organizational perspective, but also from a cultural perspective, and bringing in the type of leaders that are going to abide by these certain kind of boundaries that we're placing around our organizational culture to be able to make the 4-day work week effective and sustainable over time.
And I think you nailed it, Shannel, with saying that culture has a lot to do with it, right? And if we have a culture where people are constantly working overtime or are expected to work overtime, they're expected to work on the weekends or to answer messages on the weekends, for example, this type of rollout, even if it's just a pilot program, will not be as effective as the main objective of it, right? So I think that when leaders are considering this before actually rolling it out, when they're assessing the feasibility, they need to have in mind that they need to take a look at their culture first. What is our current culture around working hours, about overtime, about time off? If we don't have that clear early on, when we roll this out, it's just going to make it more evident. I think it's not going to, like, it's going to amplify some of the difficulties of this process, because it's going to be less time that you have your people in the office or connecting actually on a remote workplace situation. So I think that that's really important. And a second thing that I think is really important is, how are we measuring success with the 4-day work week, right?
Right.
Like, what does it look like for us to have been successful in those 6 months? For example, if we're doing a pilot program, what does it mean? Like, what are we looking for? Are we looking for that those boundaries were completely respected and everybody worked within the hours that they had to work because workload was managed? Are we looking
Yeah.
for an increase in productivity? Because I know a lot of companies want to do this because they think it's going to become more productive for like the end result, whatever their output is, right? So how are we measuring that? And are we communicating those measures to our people? Like, listen, we're going to do this, but we do have an ulterior motive, because companies always do, right? There's always something that we want to get in return. And so, yes, we're doing this for you guys. We're super excited about it. We want this to be better for your work life balance, but, right? So there has to be a number that we're trying to reach. That be like a financial number or just a metric of sales, whatever it is. This is what we want, and this needs to be like a cause of this. So I think that's something that employers do need to consider if they're considering the 4-day work week.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you just said in terms of the nobody believes you when you say, "Oh, this is for you." Like this, there's no financial gain for us. Nobody's gonna actually believe that. Be
'Cause
authentic
it's
and
a lie.
align your motivations, right? So
Lie.
I think that's a big piece to align your motivations, and I think that's when business works best. When it's not a win lose, when we can figure out a win win and be honest about what that means for me and what that means for you, etc. Um, some of the metrics I've seen used in some of the case studies uh, with with organizations implementing the 4-day work week include things like productivity, profitability on the business side. On the other side, things like job satisfaction and life satisfaction they've seen improve.
Yeah.
The other thing is absenteeism tends to go down. People show up because they only have a couple days to do it. They got to get the work done. Um, there's also decreased turnover that you look for, and some organizations even mentioned that they try this out because they see it as a good way to attract new employees, right? To you can be really
Yeah.
competitive in the labor market. Um, However, there are these two groups, like you said, these two groups of metrics, these two groups of different wins that you're trying to gain. And the problem is that when one of those is productivity, and output and profitability, you're not just going to put those on a wall and say, here's hoping, right? Chances are you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on your managers to make sure that that gets done. And who do you think your managers and supervisors are going to be putting pressure on? And I think that this is why often in these studies you see stress and burnout increase because it's less days, but that doesn't mean that there's less work. And so now there's even more pressure, and there's more pressure on that manager to reach out and text you on their day off. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Yeah, Shannel.
Yes,
Shannel is
and
going to explode.
because I think that the problem with that is that um, yes, no, and okay, that's what I'm going to say, because where we are seeing the increase in burnout and the increase in stress and the more conversations on the weekend or the on your day off is because we organizations didn't do the proper pre-planning to prepare for the 4-day week shift change within their organization, right? So when I'm looking at this, what I mean by pre-planning is regardless of whether you're trying to do a 4-day work week, you're trying to expand into a new market, whether you're trying to build a new organization, you're trying to, acquire a business, right? There are areas by which you need to assess and shift to be able to incorporate this particular change, right? So if I'm going into a 4-day work week, I need to assess my culture. I need to assess my processes. I need to assess my systems, my tools, my people, right? Because let me tell you something, change, especially at an organizational level, is only going to magnify the issues that you are seeing in your organization prior to the change, right? So guess what? That manager that is calling that employee because they don't have the information is not the employee's fault. It's the fact that you don't have the proper systems and the proper processes in place to be able to job shadow, to be able to eliminate single person dependencies within your organization, right? These are all things that exist prior to you shifting over into a 4-day work week, right? So I 100%, agree with, no, I will say this. I see why there's an increase in burnout, but it's also because organizations didn't do the proper pre-planning and assessment and shifts prior to even doing a pilot, a model, a 6-month test, or whatever else you want to call it.
Right. And I think that's such a core issue that so many organizations,
Yeah.
their employees are working 7 days a week. And so
That's right.
maybe they're not officially but if you're working 7 days a week and suddenly you're saying we're going to a 4-day work week, that's a problem. There's inconsistency there. Or, Britni looks at these things in organizations where, you say one thing, but it doesn't match the reality of the situation.
Right. And I think for me and Brittany, I'm so sorry because I forgot. I gotta pause and give you my apologies. I am
No, you're good.
fired.
I agree with David, but yeah.
I am fired because I think that it also goes back to you still have to train employees. You still have to train your managers. I think we talked about this in season 1, right? You still have to do a people management process, right? You still have to go through and make sure that your folks are upskilled, but also you are cutting off the dead weight. There are poor performers in your organization that you are not dealing with. Okay, that is increasing the amount of work for everybody, regardless of people working 5 days, 7 days, 2 days, or 4 days, right? So, a 4-day work week or a shift in your organizational operations is not going to eliminate the fact that you have poor leaders and poor management that can't make decisions about poor performers, and then bringing in actual resources that are going to do the work that the organization needs. Britni.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, you can have best laid plans tanked by a toxic person or a poor performer because it knocks over so many dominoes. And like David said, when you have fewer days to get things done anyway, even if you did plan well, but if there's someone not pulling their weight, there's 10 other people behind them that can't do the thing before it's time to go at the end of the week. Yeah, it magnifies everything. One of the big ones being your poor performers or your toxicity centers.
I had an example for a client. They told me that they randomly one day decided, like the employees, that this might be a good idea. So they pitched it to the leader. This is a small business, right? This is not a huge corporation, but they heard about it. The HR person said, yeah, like that sounds like a great idea. Let's implement it. Again, not thinking about the culture, not thinking about the industry, not thinking about every part of the pre-planning that had to go into it. So they just did the transition. They did it for about 2 months. And at the end of the 2 months, the same employee said, oh no, this doesn't work. So they went back into 5 days. And I just think it's a microcosm of what happens if we are not cognizant of these things that are bigger than that initiative, right? There are things that are so big, like your poor performers, you have like leaders that are not trained, you have CEOs that will call you that 6th day or that Sunday, right? So it's just in terms of implementation, what do you guys think are the most important steps that people need to think about prior to, like, if we could summarize that for our audience, what do you think are those important steps before implementation?
Formalize boundaries. I think that number one, you need to formalize it. Don't allow the managers and supervisors to sort of use their own intuition, or, well, in this situation it's okay, in this situation it's not. I remember as a young employer, um, at a restaurant, one of my employees, one of my managers, left after a long day, working, and she was absolutely amazing. And I logged on to the cameras from home, because I was that sort of entrepreneur, like always on. And I saw that the lights were on all over the place. So I just texted her. I said, dude, you left all the lights on. And she quit. And she was amazing. But she
That
quit.
was the straw. That was
And
the
this was
straw.
before 2020, right? But she quit, right? As like, I totally understand. I'm over it. I'm over it. It's fine. But no,
Are
but like,
you?
seriously, I understand. It's like she had just worked this long, hard day in food service and then went home, and then she gets a text from the boss. She shouldn't get a text from me, even saying, great job, maybe. Maybe that's even too much. Just let her unplug, right? Um, Recently, someone I know, I shouldn't really get into too many details, but this individual is a teacher. They were taking off a day to take care of their sick child, and they received a text message from the principal reminding them that today would be a great day to work on report cards because you're home anyway, right? And then later in the day, this individual got on a meeting, with a bunch of other principals for like work stuff, and then, um, they later came to find out that they were docked, family leave day. So family medical leave day. So let's not, we're not lawyers, but it's
I was about
kind
to
of,
say.
but outside of that, even from the IO perspective, that's not good leadership, right? It's like, don't, like, set up boundaries. If your person's not in the office, then they don't exist right now. And to the extent that that's possible, it's not possible in every organization at every level, but there needs to be an agreement and an understanding, where everybody's on the same page as to, what that looks like. And you need to protect your people from themselves, even those employees, specifically those employees who are your high potential employees, the ones that would do anything for the organization, the ones that never unplug. You have to get them to unplug, because otherwise they'll be your all-star for a limited time, because eventually everybody either burns out or the world around them burns down. Either way, it doesn't work out really well for the individual or the organization.
My
Britni.
suggestion would be, to answer Deborah's question, is David mentioned earlier, you have to align with your motivators. And so I would frame that as, you need, when you're doing that prep work that Shannel is talking about, make sure you're aligning with your values. So, for example, if quality of product to customers is one of your values, that cannot take a hit when you make a
Mm-hmm.
change, because you say that's the thing that's important to you. And if this program falls apart and you go back to the 5-day work week, you are breaking way more things than just, you have annoyed employees that now have to be in on Friday or have to be in on 5 days. I mean, you have people that had childcare arrangements they had to rearrange when you went to 4 days. Now they have to rearrange in the 5 days. You have people that are caring for sick or elderly relatives. You have people that have to refigure out like school schedules, all kinds of things. The person they live with, their partner, may have to change their work schedule because they were expecting to stay on the 4-day work week. So you're breaking these things with your employees if you screw it up. But if you screw up your values, even more stakeholders are going to be able to see, okay, the thing that they say they care about, clearly they don't care about. What do they care about? If this is the thing they were willing to put words behind, do they care about anything if they don't care about my quality of product? So aligning that with your motivators or your values is incredibly important. That's for every change management, but especially with the 4-day work week, because this requires people to change their life, the pattern of their life during the week, which is huge.
So, and I want to actually echo kind of what you said, Britni, and kind of piggyback. So, making that really tactical within that particular pre planning phase, have the conversation, conduct the primary research with the folks in your organization, right? Like, I'm talking about all types of ways in which you can get as much feedback as you possibly can, right? From whether that those are focus groups, surveys, one-on-one interviews, right? Like town halls, right? Get as much information in regards to not just impact of a 4-day work week, but solutions or suggestions, right? Because it may not be a 4-day work week, right? And it may be, something else that would impact or increase culture. But specifically speaking to the 4-day work week, you should really get that additional feedback. And then if you really want to start looking at the different kind of themes, you should align it to your point, Britni, around values, strategic objectives around the organization, right? Operational enablers, culture, I would say your customer. Don't forget to talk about, the impact to the customer and the impact to profit and the impact if you have shareholders, right? I think that there needs to be elements in which people can almost have a targeted discussion around impact of this thing around those different triggers within your organization. And now we are able to make a sound decision on whether we go or no go. Right. And if so, then these are the things that we're going to need to do in order to improve our organization to prepare us for something like a 4-day work week. So that's what I mean when I was stating earlier, there is just so much work that should be done. And it can't just be an arbitrary decision because it won't be sustainable. Right. And to David's point, there has to be those measures that are unique to that organization that aligns to those impact triggers within your organization to be able to assess whether or not this is a success.
So can I just piggyback on what you said with the question? What about like when you are surveying, focus grouping, interviewing your people to figure out their attitudes around this and what's going on? What about these organizations, which I would assume would be close to 100% of organizations that would do this? You've got people who are like, yes, this is the most exciting thing ever. I'm so glad that you're considering this. Let's do it. And people who say, oh, no, I still want to come in 5 days a week. What do you do?
I personally think that it should be like talked about, right? I think that what Shannel is mentioning makes sense in that way, that it should be a conversation and you should be able to measure that temperature, right? Like in the organization, what's the pulse? I have 50% of people that want to come in 4 days a week, and I have 50% of people that want to come in 4 days a week. And so how do we manage that? Because to Shannel's point, we need to figure out what the organization says about this, like every member in every department that might be affected. And there will be a department that says, listen, our computers need to be managed 7 days a week. We can't do this, or we can, but it would take X, Y, and Z for us to be able to do it. And that's the conversation that I think companies need to have. And so, but I think this is a very personal opinion. If you have a lot of people that feel very strongly about the 5-day work week, like they want to stay the same, that's their status quo. Unless you're willing to put all of your money, attention, and resource into changing your culture for it to be a 4-day week only, don't force that upon them. I'm going to rephrase that a little bit. Like, you might lose those employees if you force it upon them and don't give them options, right? So I do think that if that comes up a lot when you're doing that pre-planning, that investigation, those focus groups, maybe allow it, because if not, they're just gonna leave, right? And I think that it's much more dangerous to ask a question, have a response, and then go against the response anyways. Once, like, if you're not going to put your whole culture behind that, if you are going to put your whole culture behind that, just be prepared to lose those folks and be okay with it. But if you don't want to lose those folks, you gotta do the balancing act.
I would be
I think.
very. You're absolutely
I
right.
don't know.
Okay,
I
Britni
think
has. This is
go
a
ahead,
debate.
Britni.
Yes, go
Go ahead,
Britni.
Britni.
I don't know, because naysayers are stinking loud, and so many of them convert after the change. You might lose them.
Okay.
I also think the moment you give someone a promotion that was a 5-day person and not a 4-day person, it's all broken.
Oh, and it's gonna happen.
Well, what
Of
I'm
course, it's
saying
gonna
is
happen.
be prepared to lose them, right? Like, I just want
Yeah.
organizations to understand that if they don't give the option, people might leave. That's what I'm saying, right? Like, with any
Yeah.
kind of change, this happens.
Yes, and that was where I was gonna go. Was I want to see the stats on how many people left organizations because they made them come back into the office, right? Where you have these people that are like, yeah, they make 150K a year, and their job's like, oh, sorry, we need you back into this cubicle, ma'am. All right, come on in. And they're in here like, I'm gonna quit, but okay, now they in there 5 days a week. Right? They're probably less productive, right? I just want to see the stats on that, because you're right, Deborah. You're going to get a handful of, regardless of whatever change, you're going to get a handful of people that are going to lose. That are going to leave and say, no, this is not for me, and that's fine. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you gotta. When you do a cultural shift, I need people that are not aligned to where the organization is going to leave. Okay.
That's
And
what
so
I
that
meant.
is, yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Right. But I also know that, when you are continuously digging into the why, you're asking those 5 whys, right? And really trying to get to the heart of the reason why you are not necessarily a naysayer, but don't like kind of where the organization is going. I think that's important work for your high performers. I think that's an important work for the people in the organization you see high potential, right? Is to sit down and go, all right, we're shifting to this 4-day work week. We're shifting to this 3-day work week. We're shifting to 10-hour, whatever it is. Like, let's kind of talk a little bit about you, because I value you as an employee. I value you as a person, and I just want to understand why this is not something that works for you. Right? You're going to have those offline conversations with your high performers in your organization. But yeah, like, losing folks is a part of the game when it comes to culture shifts.
So Shannel, you're saying don't give options then. If you're doing 4
No, I'm
days,
not saying
everybody's
that
4
I
days.
can't do a blanket don't give options. All I'm saying is that if you assess the workforce and you have a 50-50 split on, yes, I want to do a 5-day work week, or I want to do a 4-day work week, right? Like, now it's kind of digging in. And there's two things that you can do. And it all depends on whether or not you are assessing the workforce because you are already set on doing a 4-day work week, or you are assessing the workforce because this is something that we are potentially proposing and we want to see if
Mm-hmm.
it's a possibility. That's 2 different ways in which you would approach this, and different courses of actions based off of what you receive back from your employees. So I think that ultimately, if you are able as an organization to provide options, and a lot of organizations they'll do maybe a 4-day work week every other week, right? And you're working 10 hours a week, or, sometimes it's, you can do 9 to 5 and you can do a regular week. Like, I've worked for all types of organizations and worked with organizations that have those different possibilities, right? But I can't answer that question, as a broad brushstroke.
Yeah, because I'm just seeing this potential of Fridays being boys' day, because overwhelmingly it's women who want more time away from the office, right? And so to say, like, Fridays, yeah, if you want to work 5 days a week, then you can come in on Fridays. Then Fridays become the um, basically the golf course, right? Where the male employees, the high potential employees and managers used to go golf, and the women wouldn't come, and they'd have their side conversations, and those people would become promotions.
David, is this what we going to do in the last 6 minutes? Is this what we going in the last
No,
6
I'm
minutes?
saying, is there an equity issue? I'm saying, is there an equity issue, right? I think it's an important thing to consider if you allow some people to come in 5 days, and then, but you have this blanket thing for 4 days, unless you want to come in for 5, then you're going to start seeing a split in your workforce, and you are going to see 5-day-a-week people getting promoted because they're the ones that are showing the potential. They're showing up on Friday. They're smooth talking the bosses, right? I mean, aren't you going to see that?
Yes, and I would absolutely say that you probably will, depending on the type of organization that you're working in. And it goes back to your pre-planning. It goes back to your culture. It goes back to the people that are actually on the organization leading. Because I currently work for an organization where my head honcho boss comes into work every day. He comes into the office every single day, right? And I can absolutely say that whether I come in once a week, every other week, or once a month, right? That does not go into, oh, Shannel should get a promotion, or because she's coming in every day and schmoozing with the boss, right? That's not the type of organization that I work for, because that's not the type of culture that gets rewarded, right? So it's one of those things where you have to, that's why it's so important for this pre-planning, David, because you can fall into the traps. And although I didn't know where you was going, where you ended, I do agree with.
Our faces, we're like,
where are you going? I do agree with, because there is the trap where you're like, oh, I see Becky 5 days a week, or I see John 5 days a week, right? Like, yeah, that's my homeboy, that's my homegirl. I need to promote them because they're doing more work than me seeing Deborah 4 days a week, or me seeing David 4 days a week, right? And we just not rewarding that type of behavior.
Right. This comes back to that manager training to get everybody on the right page.
Everything goes back to training.
All right, guys. So we have about 4 minutes left. Let's do 30-second takeaways for our audience, and then we have news for everyone.
Sure. Am I starting the 30-second takeaways? Because
let's do it again.
Oh, God.
David, Britni, Shannel, and me.
Okay, my 30-second takeaway is I want to know where they thought I was going with that. Maybe you'll tell me offline. And I think my big takeaway is that these things are complicated, and just because you see that it worked in a study doesn't mean that it worked for that organization long term. We really know nothing about this at this point, and we certainly do not know anything about how this would work in your organization. Everything starts, like any change management initiative, with understanding your organization.
Yep. Even if it did work somewhere else and that's a competitor and you want to be just like them, just because it worked there does not mean it's right for you. You have to measure this against your values, who you are, and where you're going. And if you don't plan it and execute it along those same lines, it's going to do more harm than good for your organization.
Yep. Double click into what David and Britni says. I think that you have to do the upfront research. You have to understand the people in your organization, and you have to understand where your organization is trying to go. You can't just look at one thing and say, yep, that's for us, right? Do the due diligence, conduct the necessary research, hire the people to actually, help you assess whether or not this organizational change is for you. Because if not, you could absolutely lose money and valuable resources trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And what I would add to that, in the pre-planning, just make sure that you're considering feasibility, what metrics you're going to be measuring, what steps to implementation you're going to take, the impact it might have on different measures like productivity, employee morale, what it would look like for your recruitment and selection, and also what it would do to your client if it would have an effect on them. It's just a few things to consider before even thinking about it. So,
great.
All right.
Why don't I see Britni's and Deborah's thing? Is that like, are we alluding to something, David? What is happening?
That was totally by accident.
I see. Oh,
it's so
that's right. We don't have names.
So interesting.
Hashtag
Deborah,
awkward.
Britni, do you have something to tell us?
So today's debate is the last one for this season of the work culture debates. But also, Deborah and I are going to be stepping away from the work culture debates because of different life events, where our careers are headed. So, David, the work culture debates was your idea originally. You emailed me, and I got the email in the middle of the night one night, and I said, "Oh my word, we have to do this." It's been a fun ride. I will enjoy watching how it continues to evolve, how you take it, how you tackle next season and the many seasons along. So I remain a friend of the work culture debates, but I won't be on here, as a panelist any longer.
Yeah, same. I am very, very happy for all like this whole year and everything that I have learned next to Shannel, David, and Britni. I am very, very honored that Britni brought me in. And I am super excited to see where this goes, who the next panelists are going to be. And I am just so very grateful for the just the trust and the openness to receive me in this space. And I've learned a lot. I want to say that I've learned a lot like next to you guys. So thank you so much.
Well, this has been
Y'all have been
incredible.
excellent.
What's that?
I was like, y'all have been excellent. Like, I truly enjoyed meeting you all and working with you all and getting to know each all. I think we've laughed, we've cried, we've done all the things over this past year and a half. It's been a fantastic journey, and y'all are part of my network. I'm a part of you all's networks, and wherever you all go, I will absolutely support you 155%.
Yeah,
Feel the same
we've
about you.
cried, but not live because
Not
No,
we're
not
not those kind of LinkedIn
no,
influencers.
because we
But
hoard. We hoard.
callback. But really, this has been an amazing ride. I'm looking forward to see how Shannel and I keep this going, as you were oftentimes a buffer between us going
That's
at it.
right.
And people don't know, but behind the scenes, maybe they know, but behind the scenes, Britni and Deborah have been doing all of the heavy lifting. They've been incredible in terms of getting this stuff, produced every month, and it has just been so amazing, spending these really valuable hours with you all, and you all better stay in touch.
That's right.
Oh,
We will.
you're coming to Puerto Rico, so it's fine. We'll talk about it later.
For sure.
All
All
right,
right,
y'all.
everybody.
All
We'll
right,
see you
guys.
next.
Bye.
Some of us will see you next season.
Yes.